Nobody ever asks them, do you regret having lied to Oprah Winfrey? Do you regret having lied on Netflix and all the magazine interviews? Don't you see what a terrible mistake you've made?
In December 2020, Spotify signed Harry and Meghan to a deal reported in the tens of millions. It produced 12 episodes. By 2023, it was finished. Netflix had quietly shrunk its deal, and Archewell was carrying a delinquency notice from the state of California. Tom Bower has spent 2 books tracking how a couple who left a 1,000-year-old institution ended up with nothing left to sell but the story of leaving.
Well, the theme is, of course, they broke away 5 years ago. The story really now is about their decline, about their desperation.
His new account ranks the errors: the money, the courtrooms, the charities, the brother. And one of them, he argues, is the only mistake on the list that can never be reversed. The money that never arrived. The plan was not complicated. Trade the palace for Hollywood. Keep the fame, lose the rules, let the studios pay for it. In January 2020, they stepped back. By September that year, the Netflix deal was signed, the Spotify deal followed in December. And there were serious people in Los Angeles who believed this couple would build a production company to rival the studios. Spotify ended after 1 season. Netflix cooled into something far smaller than the announcement had promised.
And of course, the income has now stopped. Netflix doesn't pay them, Spotify doesn't pay them.
And the word that started following them around was not royal. It was grifters. And it did not come from the British press. It came from inside Spotify itself, from one of the company's own senior podcast figures, on a podcast, in public, shortly after the deal ended. That is a detail worth sitting with. The insult that stuck was issued by the industry they had moved across the world to join. Bower's verdict now is flat. The Netflix series is finished, there is no significant podcast, and in his reading, none of it generates real money anymore. But the deals were never only income, they were evidence. Proof that you could walk away from a 1,000-year-old institution and land somewhere better. 5 years on, the evidence has been withdrawn, and the argument it was making has gone with it. Bower's second book opens at that peak, in the months when the couple believed the numbers announced in the press were the numbers they would keep earning. What the book then tracks is the descent from it. A house that charges rent forever. The Montecito house cost a reported $14 million in June 2020. 9 bedrooms, 16 bathrooms, 5 acres. But a property like that is not a purchase, it is a subscription. Security, staff, grounds, insurance, maintenance, California property taxes that would cover an average mortgage twice over. Bower estimates security alone at between $1.5 and $2 million a year.
They spend a fortune, not least on security, but their huge mansion in Montecito in California.
The house and staff at another $2 million, and total annual expenditure at roughly $3 million, which means earning $4 or $5 million just to stand still. Then he makes one observation that tells you more than any figure. In Montecito, he argues, nobody buys a house and simply moves in. You buy it, then spend millions remodeling, because that is what people at that level do. They moved in. Moving straight in without touching anything is what people do when the money has an edge to it. Against that, the income is speaking fees and a handful of endorsements. Nothing left to sell but the story. Every entertainer eventually gets asked the same question. What else have you got? Bower's answer is the hardest thing he says. There was never anything underneath. No writing, no producing, no craft that existed independently of the name they were born with or married into. Just the story of leaving, told again in a slightly different format each time. You can sell that story once, maybe twice. Oprah was the first sale in March 2021. Spare was the second in January 2023. The Netflix series sat between them. By the fourth telling, the audience already knew the ending. Bower attributes it to limited original talent combined with an inflated sense of self-importance, and argues that combination is fatal in Hollywood specifically. Los Angeles will forgive almost anything except being boring. It will work with difficult people, expensive people, unreliable people. It will not keep working with people who cannot deliver an audience. And there is an irony Bower enjoys pointing out. The couple who demanded to be judged on their own merits rather than their titles ran into exactly one problem. Hollywood took them at their word. The bill from the High Court. Harry has spent years in British courtrooms, and some of that he would describe as principle. But litigation costs money, and in Britain the losing side usually pays the other side's costs as well as its own. The case against Associated Newspapers, publisher of the Daily Mail, went against him. The costs reported since run into figures most people would call life-changing. Bauer argues the money is the smaller problem. His warning is that if these cases keep going badly, Harry is left branded as a man whose evidence was not accepted as honest or sincere, and that the reputational fall from there runs faster than Harry understands. There is a second cost that does not appear on any bill. Litigation has become the closest thing Harry has to a full-time occupation. Court dates, witness statements, appeals, years of preparation, and a public identity increasingly defined by proceedings rather than by anything produced. Then Bauer reaches for a comparison, and he chooses it deliberately. Andrew. Not a comparison about conduct. A comparison about what that family does with someone once the courts have finished with them. Andrew was not removed for what he did. He was removed at the moment his presence became a liability the institution could not carry. The monarchy has already proved it will amputate a son, and everyone watched it happen in public.
Andrew has been a disaster for the royal family, but
Yeah.
you know, both have been disasters.
Yeah.
And the royal family, because of both of them, has been severely weakened.
Andrew's titles went, then the honors, then the residence. The sequence took years and ended with a man in his 60s with no role and no way back. Bauer's point is not that Harry has done what Andrew did. It is that the mechanism exists, has been tested, and does not require anyone to be found guilty of anything. Subscribe now, because the next section is about the one thing Harry built himself. Bauer says the money behind it is walking away. The sponsors who stopped signing. Whatever anyone thinks of Harry, Invictus is the real thing. Founded in 2014, it puts wounded servicemen and women into competition and gives them something on the other side of what happened to them. His best idea and his most defensible achievement. Nobody serious argues otherwise. Now, according to Bauer, the sponsors are getting harder to find, and his explanation is unsentimental because corporate money is unsentimental. He argues the games have been drawn into Meghan's promotional orbit, and that attention drops away the moment she leaves the venue, whether that venue is Vancouver, Dusseldorf, or anywhere else. A sponsor signs a check for goodwill. That is the entire transaction. The moment a logo sits beside a name that starts arguments, the calculation changes. Corporations do not announce withdrawals. There is no statement and no explanation. They simply decline to renew, and the relationship expires quietly. The next games are due in Birmingham in 2027, on British soil, which should be the easiest addition to fund in the Foundation's history. Bauer describes it approaching with backers thinning out, and not enough money to stage the event as it should be staged. Competitors have already described paying for their own travel, their own accommodation, their own equipment. The athletes did nothing wrong, and they are the ones absorbing it. Invictus was never a vanity project. It was built to be the argument that Harry was more than his surname, the one venture nobody could dismiss as celebrity content. If the funding for that thins out while the entertainment deals are also gone, then the shortfall is not commercial. It is a verdict on the name attached to the letterhead. The paperwork that told on them. Archewell launched in 2020 with real ambition. Then the state of California declared it delinquent, not in good standing, not permitted to solicit or spend charitable funds, which is essentially everything a foundation exists to do. In fairness, and this matters, the cause was administrative. Registration fees were filed incorrectly. Reportedly, nobody there knew until the notice landed, and the status was corrected. But Bauer's argument was never about the fee. It is about what the lapse exposed. A serious foundation, properly staffed, does not lose its legal standing in its home state because nobody was watching the filings. That does not happen to organizations with functioning back offices. It happens where the launch was the point, and the operation was the afterthought. Filed accounts have also shown the money arriving overwhelmingly from a very small number of very large donors, with general public fundraising registering in the low thousands. Bauer's view is that the foundation became more about appearance than long-term impact. Donors read those filings, too, and donors talked to each other. The charity he founded and lost. Sent a Ball was Harry's charity in the truest sense. He founded it in 2006 when he was 21, with Prince Siso of Lesotho in memory of his mother, working with children affected by HIV. It carried nearly 20 years of his adult life. In March 2025, he walked away from it. His departure came with a public dispute involving the chair, Sophie Chandauka, and the board, played out in the press with accusations traveling in both directions.
You're saying, Sophie, number one, that what you discovered was essentially donors were walking because of the prince's reputation.
Yes.
Bauer's account is that it became a battle for control, one Harry was losing, and that the attempt to force the chair's resignation ended in court and triggered a charity commission review of how the organization had been run. Bauer also argues Harry had grown tired of the fundraising itself, the polo matches, the obligations, and had gone years without visiting the country the charity serves. Prince Seiso, the co-founder, stepped back at the same time, which removed both founding patrons from an organization named after a word in Sesotho, meaning forget-me-not. The Charity Commission opened a compliance case. Whatever it concluded, the damage was done in the first week, in public, in the newspapers. Set the rights and wrongs aside, because the argument does not depend on who was right. What is left is the shape of it. A man walking away from his mother's memorial project, in public, through lawyers. And it fits into a sequence. Sentabale, then the Invictus sponsors, then the Archewell donors. 3 organizations in 3 countries with 3 separate boards, and one name common to all of them. Bauer's conclusion is that Harry's public value has been in continuous decline since 2020, and that people who once wanted his name on their work are quietly deciding they would rather it was not there. None of them announce it. The door with one price on it. Bauer believes they are trying to come back, not to royal duties, to royal proximity. Close enough to be photographed at the right events, close enough to matter, close enough to be bookable. He summarizes the position in 2 words, desperation and failure. And he argues that a visit to the royal family in Britain looks, from Montecito, like the shortest route back to credibility. There is exactly one price on that door, an apology. Harry's own stated condition ran the other way. He said he would return if the family apologized to him, and to Meghan, for how they were treated. No apology has come from either direction. Bauer says there has been no contrition whatsoever for anything done since 2020, and he does not expect any. Here is why the trap is perfect. An apology admits Oprah was wrong. It admits Spare was wrong. It admits 5 years of insisting they were. The wrong party was a misjudgment from the start. It does not cost pride. It costs the entire story. And the story is still, in Bauer's reading, the only product they have left. Keep watching, because the mistake Bauer ranks above all of these is still coming, and it involves a book, a brother, and a silence that has now lasted 3.5 years. The brother who never answered. Family rifts usually heal. Someone falls ill, someone has a baby. The years wear the edges off, and people find their way back to the table. Bauer does not believe this one wears down, and the reason is physical rather than emotional. Spare was published in January 2023. It sold more than 1.5 million copies in English on its first day. It described a brother in print, in detail, permanently, including a physical altercation at Nottingham Cottage. There is no version of the future in which that book is unpublished, no edition that can be recalled, and no conversation between those 2 men that does not have it sitting in the room. William has never responded, not once, publicly, in any form, in 3.5 years. In that family, silence is not the absence of feeling. It is a decision that has been maintained. Bauer's summary is that it became the royal family against the Sussexes, and the royal family won. Then he adds the part that separates him from the people cheering. Nobody won. A public war between a king's 2 sons is a catastrophe for the institution, whichever side came out ahead. The monarchy survived it and was damaged doing so. Bauer is not celebrating that. He is counting what it cost, and the largest item on the bill is not held by the palace. The people who quietly left. This is the quiet one, and Bauer delivers it almost gently. Harry grew up surrounded. Army officers from Sandhurst and 2 tours of Afghanistan, who could not have cared less about his surname and had seen him at his worst. Old schoolmates from Eton. Cousins. Household staff who had known him since he was 12 years old. Walking behind his mother's coffin in September 1997 in front of 2 billion people. Most of those connections are gone. Some to distance, some to choice, Some because Spare made being his friend an expensive proposition, since anyone who had ever been in a room with him now had to consider whether that room would appear in print. Bauer's observation is that Harry moved to a town full of celebrities.
Is a couple in California who are floundering all over the place. They need money, publicity they think will get them money. They're given publicity because we want to see how it all ends.
And lost the only thing that made him unusual. In Britain, he was somebody in every room he entered. In Montecito, he is another famous person at another party. And the competition there is professional. Reports keep surfacing that he misses home, that he misses his family, that the isolation inside a 9-bedroom house on 5 acres is real. You do not have to like the man to recognize what that describes. He is 41 years old and 5,000 miles from every person who knew him before the world did. The word that never survived contact privacy was the reason given. It was in the statement in January 2020 and in nearly every interview since. What followed was a 2-hour primetime sit-down with Oprah Winfrey, a 6-part Netflix documentary containing their own home footage, a memoir running to more than 400 pages, and years of further interviews about how impossible it is to be left alone. Bauer's assessment is plain. They said they were leaving for privacy and to step back from the royal family. And in his view, they have done the opposite of both. One distinction is worth making because Bauer does not always make it. Wanting protection from press intrusion is not the same as wanting to be unknown. And Harry's litigation against the tabloids concerns the first rather than the second. But the two were never separated in public, and the ambiguity was useful for a while before it became the first thing every critic reached for. The practical problem is simpler than the philosophical one. Every product released since 2020 has required the opposite of privacy in order to sell. The documentary needed the marriage, the memoir needed the family, the interviews needed the grievance. Privacy was the stated reason for leaving and the one commodity the business model could not afford. The weapon, the palace put down. For years, the machine ran the same way. Sussex claim, palace response, a week of headlines, everybody involved gets paid. Then Charles and William stopped answering. No rebuttals, no briefings, no sources close to the palace. And the stories began dying inside 24 hours. Bauer explains the mechanics plainly. A claim with no counterclaim is not a feud. It is one person talking, and one person talking alone is not a story an editor can run for a week. The oxygen came from the response, and the response stopped. Bauer thinks Charles should go further, and here he is critical of the king rather than the couple. He argues Charles was weak after the Queen's death in September 2022, that he should not have confirmed royal titles for the Sussex children, and that he should have made a formal declaration ending the ambiguity both sides have been trading on ever since. Draw the line, state it publicly, and stop the arrangement where two people are neither in nor out. The most effective weapon the monarchy has used in 5 years was declining to pick one up. Sympathy has an expiry date. On the 7th of March 2021, 17 million people in the United States watched the Oprah interview, and around 11 million watched it in Britain the following night. A great many of them felt genuinely sorry for the couple, and that reaction was honest and widespread. But sympathy does not renew itself. Bauer's point is that sympathy is spent by resolution. You feel for someone, you watch them get past the thing that hurt them, and the story closes. That is the arc audiences want, and the arc they will pay for. What arrived instead was 5 more years of the same grievance restated in a new format. Netflix in December 2022, Spare in January 2023. Interviews after that about how difficult it is to be left alone. Unrenewed sympathy does not curdle into hostility. It becomes something worse for anyone earning a living from public attention. Indifference. The audience does not turn on you. It stops arriving, and nobody tells you the day it happens. Bauer describes a couple who built a manor in which being a victim mattered as much as winning, and argues that companies now price in the controversy that follows them. He also argues they still reach for Diana whenever the ground shifts under them, and that victimhood in this culture buys sympathy that nobody is expected to interrogate. That worked in 2021. Bauer's case is that the same move now produces a shrug, and a shrug is not something you can sell to a streaming service. Every announcement draws fire. There was a period when a Sussex announcement was simply news. Now it is the opening move in an argument. Planned trips generate petitions opposing them, and public rows about who pays for security.
Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, has lost the latest stage of his court battle over the level of security protection he receives in the UK.
In May 2025, Harry lost his Court of Appeal challenge over the decision to downgrade his publicly funded protection in Britain, and gave an interview afterwards saying he could not see a way to bring his family home safely. The coverage that followed was about the interview, not the ruling. That is the pattern. Visits to Britain generate more reporting on the visit itself than on anything he came to do. The purpose disappears, and the controversy occupies the space where the purpose was. Bauer argues this is not a media problem, but a position problem. When the reaction to a person grows larger than the person, nothing they announce survives its own announcement. And he has a word for what sits underneath it: hypocrisy. A couple who lecture constantly in his account, while declining to examine their own record. What he says he is still waiting for is the question nobody has put to either of them directly on camera. Do you regret what you said to Oprah? Do you understand what it cost? And are you prepared to apologize for any of it? The case against Bauer. Bauer's thesis deserves its strongest challenge, so here it is. He is not a neutral observer. He is an author with 2 commercially successful books built on the same argument. And the argument selling well is not evidence that it is true. Much of what he describes is interpretation rather than fact. Sponsors declining to renew can reflect a difficult advertising market as easily as a reputational one. Archewell's delinquency was a filing error, corrected, of the kind that happens to real charities. Harry's litigation record is not uniformly bad. He secured a settlement and an apology from Rupert Murdoch's News Group newspapers in January 2025, which is a legal win by any measure. Meghan launched as ever in 2025, and the first product run sold out in under an hour. And Bauer's central prediction, that they will be forced back to Britain, has been made for 5 years without happening. A man predicting collapse indefinitely will eventually be right, but that is not the same as having been right all along. There is also a straightforward point about time. Harry is 41, Meghan is 44. Careers in public life have been rebuilt from worse positions than theirs, with more debt and less recognition. And 5 years is not a verdict on anything. That case deserves a proper answer. The one that cannot be taken back. So which mistake is the biggest? Bauer's list has an order to it, and the ordering principle is reversibility. A canceled deal can be replaced. Sponsors return when the noise dies down. A foundation refiles its paperwork within a month. Even a court defeat is eventually paid off and forgotten. Spare cannot be unpublished. That is the one, and it is the one because of what it spent. Harry's single irreplaceable asset was never a production credit or a podcast. It was that he was Prince Harry, a member of that family in good standing, and that title opened every door he has walked through, including all the doors in California. He converted the relationship itself into a book advance, and the conversion only works once. There is no second memoir with the same value, because the material that made the first one worth a reported 8-figure sum was the family's willingness to keep him inside it. He is 41, 5,000 miles from everyone who knew him before the world did. And Bauer's conclusion is that they will be remembered not for what they contributed to the institution, but almost entirely for the war with it. Meanwhile, Charles was crowned, William stepped forward, Catherine returned from cancer treatment too. Enormous public warmth, and the Sandringham photographs at Christmas looked exactly the same without them. Nothing broke, there was no vacancy where they had been, and no evidence in the ratings or the crowds that anyone was waiting for them to return. The institution absorbed the loss in the first 18 months, and the ceremonies carried on without a visible gap. That is the part Bauer says neither of them planned for, because the entire strategy assumed the family needed them more than they needed the family. That is the position now. Too far outside to be royal, too dependent on it to be anything else. Bauer is not saying it ended today. He is saying there is no version of the next 10 years in which any of this improves without the one thing they have refused to do for 5 years. And that even if they did it, the book stays published. What Bauer is describing is not a scandal. It is arithmetic. Costs that do not fall, income that does, and a single asset that was spent in one transaction and cannot be recovered. That is why he thinks the ending is already written, whatever either of them does next. If you want more of this story as it develops, subscribe. Then answer one question in the comments. Was the memoir the mistake that cannot be undone, or does the door still open? And if you want the same 5 years told from inside the palace, the video on your screen now is where to go next.